Hey there, welcome to Busy Horse channel, where amazing stories never stop. If you crave mind-blowing surprises, epic drama, and perfect revenge moments, you are in the right place. Subscribe today and jump into tales that will leave you speechless, laughing, and wanting more. Incredible characters, unbeatable twists, and super satisfying endings. That's what Busy Horse channel brings you every single time. Smash that bell and let's dive in.
Nice try. I saw that pill before it hit the glass.
I'm Nick Callahan, and I should have seen it coming. After 15 years of marriage to Vanessa, I knew her tells better than anyone. The way she kept glancing at her phone, the nervous energy crackling around her like static electricity, and most damning of all, the genuine smile she'd been wearing all evening. My wife never smiled at these firm parties unless she was getting something out of it. Having fun, honey? Vanessa appeared at my elbow, pressing a fresh whiskey into my hand. Her voice had that honey-sweet tone she used when she wanted something, usually money for another designer handbag or my agreement to skip another weekend with my friends. Oh, absolutely, I replied, taking the glass but not drinking. Nothing says Merry Christmas like watching lawyers pretend they have souls. She laughed, but it was forced. Her eyes were scanning the crowd, and I followed her gaze to see Greg Porter making his entrance. Greg was the firm's golden boy, 34 years old with perfect teeth and a trust fund that made his partnership track as smooth as his Italian leather shoes. He was also, I was beginning to suspect, the reason for my wife's recent glow. Greg looks good tonight, I said casually, watching Vanessa's reaction. Does he? I hadn't noticed. But her cheeks flushed pink, and she touched her hair unconsciously. Dead giveaway. The hotel ballroom was decorated like a winter wonderland, all white lights and silver tinsel. The firm had spared no expense as usual. Vanessa's law office specialized in corporate defense, which meant they had plenty of money to throw around. The partners were clustered near the bar, their wives draped in jewelry that cost more than most people's cars. I nursed my untouched whiskey and watched my wife work the room. She was good at it, I had to admit. Vanessa had always been beautiful, but tonight she was radiant in a way that made my chest tight with suspicion. Her black dress hugged her curves perfectly, and she'd done something different with her hair. She looked like a woman with a secret. Nick. Tommy Rodriguez appeared beside me, slightly drunk and grinning. Tommy was my best friend and business partner at our classic car restoration shop. He was also the only person who'd agreed to come with me to this corporate nightmare. This place is fancy as heck. You see that ice sculpture? It's bigger than my apartment. Yeah, it's something. I was still watching Vanessa, who had drifted closer to where Greg was holding court with a group of junior associates. You okay, man? You look like someone stole your lunch money. Before I could answer, the music changed to something slow and romantic. I watched in fascination as Greg excused himself from his admirers and walked directly to my wife. She accepted his hand with a smile that made my stomach drop. They moved onto the dance floor together, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. It wasn't just the way they danced, too close, too familiar. It was the way Vanessa's whole body seemed to come alive in his arms. She never looked at me like that anymore. Dude, Tommy said quietly, please tell me I'm not seeing what I think I'm seeing. You're seeing it. I took a sip of my whiskey and immediately tasted something bitter underneath the alcohol. My blood went cold. Tommy, I need you to do me a favor. Go to the bar and get me another drink. Same thing, but from the bartender directly. Why? Just do it, and don't let anyone see you bring it to me. While Tommy was gone, I moved closer to the dance floor, staying in the shadows near the wall. The music was loud enough that I had to strain to hear, but I caught fragments of their whispered conversation. Already taken care of. Room 322? Won't remember anything. My hands started shaking. Tommy returned with the fresh drink, and I quickly switched glasses, pouring the doctored whiskey into a nearby plant. The bitter taste was already fading from my mouth, but the implications were crystal clear. What's going on? Tommy asked. My wife just tried to roofie me. Tommy's eyes went wide. Are you sure? Positive? And I'm pretty sure I know why. I nodded toward the dance floor where Vanessa and Greg were still swaying together, lost in their own world. The song ended, and they reluctantly separated. But before they parted, I saw Greg lean down and whisper something in Vanessa's ear that made her laugh and nod eagerly. I had two choices. Confront them now and cause a scene, or play along and see how deep this rabbit hole went. The smart money was on confrontation, but I'd always been too curious for my own good. Tommy, I need you to help me with something. In about 10 minutes, I'm going to start acting really drowsy. When I do, help me to that couch over there and make sure everyone sees that I'm passed out. Nick, this is crazy. We should just... Please, I need to know what they're planning. Tommy looked like he wanted to argue, but he'd known me long enough to recognize when my mind was made up. Okay, but if this goes sideways, I'm calling the cops. I spent the next few minutes making a show of drinking my sedated whiskey, occasionally stumbling slightly or blinking slowly. It wasn't hard to fake. I'd seen enough drunk people in my time. When I judged the timing was right, I grabbed Tommy's arm. I don't feel so good, I said loudly enough for nearby people to hear. Whoa, buddy, maybe you should sit down. Tommy played his part perfectly, guiding me to a leather couch in a dimly lit corner of the ballroom. I let my eyes flutter closed and went limp, but kept my breathing steady and my ears open. Within minutes, I heard Vanessa's voice nearby. Oh my God, is Nick okay? He's fine, Tommy said. Just had a little too much to drink. You know how he gets at these things. Poor baby. I should stay with him. Nah, don't worry about it. I'll keep an eye on him. You go enjoy the party. There was a pause, and then I heard the rustle of Vanessa's dress as she moved away. I cracked one eye open just enough to see her rejoining Greg near the bar. They talked for a moment, their heads close together, and then they both looked in my direction. Greg said something that made Vanessa laugh, and then they walked toward the exit together. I waited until they were gone before sitting up. Did you see that? Yeah, I saw it. Your wife just left you passed out at a party to go hook up with some lawyer. Not just hook up. They planned this, Tommy. The sedated drink, the room reservation, all of it. My phone was in my jacket pocket, and I quickly opened the camera app. If they were going to room 322, I was going to document every second of it. This is insane, Tommy muttered as we made our way toward the elevator. No, this is evidence. The hotel was a boutique place downtown, the kind with thick carpets and gold fixtures that screamed expensive. The elevator to the third floor seemed to take forever, and my heart was pounding so hard I was sure Tommy could hear it. Room 322 was halfway down a dimly lit hallway. The door was closed, but I could see light underneath. I pulled out my phone and started recording as we approached. Nick, maybe we should... The sound of laughter from inside the room cut him off. Vanessa's laughter, bright and carefree in a way I hadn't heard in years. I pressed my ear to the door and immediately wished I hadn't. The sounds coming from inside left no doubt about what was happening. My wife of 15 years was in that room with another man, and they were having the time of their lives. Got enough? Tommy whispered. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. We made our way back to the elevator in silence. Back in the ballroom, I found a quiet corner and reviewed the video on my phone. It wasn't much, just footage of them entering the room together. But combined with the sedated drink and their whispered conversation, it painted a clear picture. What now? Tommy asked. Now we wait. And we plan. The party continued around us, but I felt disconnected from it all, like I was watching everything through glass. Vanessa's friends kept asking where she was, and I made excuses about her not feeling well. The irony wasn't lost on me. Around midnight, I saw Greg return to the ballroom alone. His hair was mussed and his tie was crooked, but he was wearing the satisfied smile of a man who'd gotten exactly what he wanted. He rejoined his group of admirers as if nothing had happened. Vanessa appeared 20 minutes later, slipping back into the party with practiced casualness. Her dress was wrinkled and her lipstick was gone, but she'd fixed her hair and composed herself. She made a beeline for the couch where I was supposedly passed out. Nick? Honey, wake up. She shook my shoulder gently, and I let my eyes flutter open. Ness? What happened? You fell asleep, sweetheart. Too much whiskey. Her voice was full of false concern, and I had to fight the urge to grab her by the shoulders and shake her. I feel terrible. Can we go home? Of course. Let me get our coats. The ride home was quiet. Vanessa drove while I pretended to doze in the passenger seat, but I was actually thinking. Planning. By the time we pulled into our driveway, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I waited until Vanessa was in the shower before I started searching. Our house was a colonial in one of the better neighborhoods, the kind of place that said successful couple to anyone driving by. We'd bought it 5 years ago when Vanessa made partner, and she'd insisted on decorating it herself. Everything was cream and beige and perfectly coordinated, like a magazine spread. It had never felt like home to me. Vanessa's home office was on the first floor. a converted den with built-in bookshelves and a mahogany desk that cost more than most people's cars. She kept it locked when she wasn't using it, but I'd watched her enter the combination on the electronic lock enough times to memorize it. Our wedding anniversary. The irony was almost funny. Her computer was password protected, but I knew that too. Vanessa wasn't as careful as she thought she was. Her laptop was a treasure trove of evidence emails, calendar entries, browser history that painted a very clear picture of her relationship with Greg Porter. The earliest messages dated back 6 months. They started professional enough, but quickly became personal, then intimate, then explicit. I screenshotted everything, my anger building with each revelation. But the real jackpot was her phone. Vanessa had 2 phones, her work iPhone that she carried openly, and a second Android that she thought I didn't know about. She kept it hidden in her desk drawer, wrapped in a silk scarf like some kind of precious artifact. The burner phone was where she kept the really damaging stuff. Photos I never wanted to see, videos that made my stomach turn, and text conversations that revealed the full scope of her betrayal. It wasn't just Greg. There had been others over the years. A client here, a colleague there, even one of our neighbors. The worst part wasn't the infidelity itself, though that cut deep enough. It was the casual cruelty in her messages. The way she talked about me like I was some kind of burden she had to endure. "Nick's working late again," she'd texted Greg 3 weeks ago. "Sometimes I wonder why I married such a boring man." "At least he's useful," Greg had replied. "That shop of his must be worth something. Not as much as you'd think, but the house is in both our names." I stared at that exchange for a long time, feeling something cold and hard settle in my chest. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning my future without me. The shower was still running upstairs, so I kept digging. What I found in her email drafts folder made my blood boil. It was a letter to a divorce attorney, outlining her strategy for leaving me while keeping as much of our assets as possible. She'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. Every smile, every "I love you," every moment of apparent normalcy had been a lie designed to keep me compliant while she positioned herself for maximum advantage. I copied everything to a thumb drive and put the phone back exactly where I'd found it. By the time Vanessa came downstairs in her silk pajamas, I was sitting in the living room with a glass of scotch, watching the late news. "How are you feeling?" she asked, settling onto the couch beside me with that same false concern. "Better. Sorry about tonight. I don't know what came over me." "It's okay, honey. These parties can be overwhelming." She curled up against my side, and I had to fight every instinct not to push her away. "Maybe you should see a doctor. That wasn't like you." "Maybe you're right." I took a sip of scotch and kept my voice neutral. "Did I miss anything after I passed out?" "Not really. Just the usual firm gossip. Oh, and Greg Porter asked about you. He said he hoped you felt better." I bet he did. "That was nice of him." Vanessa yawned and stretched. "I'm exhausted. I think I'll head up to bed." "I'll be up in a minute." After she was gone, I sat in the dark living room and planned my next move. I could confront her directly, but that would just lead to denials and gaslighting. I could file for divorce immediately, but she'd already anticipated that and had strategies in place. No, what I needed was leverage, information, the kind of ammunition that would let me control the narrative instead of being a victim of it. I pulled out my phone and called Tommy. "Jesus, Nick, it's 2 a.m. I need your help with something. Can you meet me at the shop tomorrow?" "Yeah, sure. But what's this about?" "I'll explain everything tomorrow. And Tommy, bring your laptop. We're going to do some research." The next morning, Vanessa left for work early, claiming she had depositions to prepare. I waited until her car was out of the driveway before I started phase 2 of my investigation. Our neighbor, Mrs. Larkin, was 83 years old and had lived on our street for 40 years. She knew everything that happened in the neighborhood, and she loved to talk about it. I found her in her front yard tending to her roses despite the December cold. "Morning, Mrs. Larkin. Beautiful flowers." "Oh, hello, Nick. How are you, dear?" She looked pleased to see me. Mrs. Larkin had always liked me better than Vanessa, though she was too polite to say so directly. "I'm fine, thanks. I was wondering if I could ask you something. Have you noticed anyone coming by the house when I'm at work?" Her expression grew guarded. "Why do you ask?" "I think someone might be using our garage without permission, maybe for storage or something." Mrs. Larkin glanced around as if checking for eavesdroppers, then leaned closer. "Well, since you mention it, I have seen that young man from Vanessa's office a few times, the one with the expensive car." "Greg Porter?" "That's the one. He's been coming by during the day, usually when you're not home. I assumed Vanessa had asked him to help with something. How many times? Oh, quite a few. Maybe once or twice a week for the past couple of months. They always go into the garage together. She paused, looking uncomfortable. Nick, dear, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but they seemed quite friendly. I thanked Mrs. Larkin and headed to my shop, my mind racing. The garage, of course. Vanessa had insisted we convert half of it into a workshop space, ostensibly for her hobbies. She'd had it soundproofed and furnished with a couch and mini fridge. At the time, I'd thought it was sweet that she wanted a creative space. Now I realized it was the perfect place for an affair. Tommy was waiting for me when I arrived at Callahan Classic Cars. My shop was my pride and joy, a converted warehouse where I restored vintage automobiles for collectors and enthusiasts. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest, and I was good at it. You look like heck, Tommy said by way of greeting. I feel worse. Coffee? We settled in my office with steaming mugs, and I told him everything I'd discovered. Tommy listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each revelation. Holy crap, Nick. I'm sorry, man. This is beyond messed up. It gets worse. I showed him the screenshots from Vanessa's phones, the draft letter to the divorce attorney, the evidence of multiple affairs. What are you going to do? I'm going to destroy them both, but I need to be smart about it. Vanessa's a lawyer, and Greg's got connections. If I move too fast or too obviously, they'll find a way to turn it around on me. Tommy cracked his knuckles. What do you need? Information. Greg Porter thinks he's untouchable, but everyone has secrets. I want to know what his are. We spent the morning researching Greg's background, social media, professional profiles, court records, anything we could find online. What emerged was a picture of a man who'd had everything handed to him his entire life. Prep school, Ivy League college, law degree paid for by daddy's money. But there were cracks in the golden boy facade. A sealed juvenile record that we couldn't access, but that suggested trouble in his teens. A pattern of job changes that didn't quite make sense for someone with his credentials. And most interesting, a series of complaints filed against him with the State Bar Association that had been quietly settled. Misconduct, Tommy said, reading over my shoulder. 3 different complaints in the past 5 years, all settled out of court with non-disclosure agreements. That's our angle. If we can prove he's a serial predator, it changes the whole narrative. How do we prove it? We find the women who filed those complaints. NDAs don't prevent them from talking to law enforcement, and they don't prevent other people from investigating. I made a list of names and started making phone calls. It took most of the afternoon, but eventually I reached Sarah Martinez, a former paralegal who'd worked at Vanessa's firm 3 years ago. I can't talk about Greg Porter, she said immediately when I mentioned his name. I'm not asking you to break any agreements. I'm asking you to listen. I told her about Vanessa's affair, about the sedated drink, about the pattern I was seeing. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. He's doing it again, isn't he? She finally said. What do you mean? The same pattern. Targeting married women, preferably ones with something to lose, making them feel special, then using them to get information or leverage. Her voice was bitter. Your wife isn't his first married conquest, Mr. Callahan. She won't be his last. Will you help me? Another long pause. What did you have in mind? By the time I got home that evening, I had a plan. It was risky and complicated, but it had the potential to destroy both Greg and Vanessa while keeping my own hands relatively clean. Vanessa was in the kitchen, making dinner and humming to herself. She looked radiant again, practically glowing with happiness. The sight of her contentment made me sick. How was your day? She asked, kissing my cheek as if she hadn't spent the morning planning my financial ruin. Busy. We got a new client, a guy with a 1967 Mustang that needs a complete rebuild. That's wonderful, honey. But she wasn't really listening. Her phone was buzzing with text messages, and I could see her fingers twitching with the urge to check them. Go ahead, I said. Answer your messages. I know work is important. She gave me a grateful smile and picked up her phone. I watched her face light up as she read whatever Greg had sent her, and I felt that cold, hard thing in my chest grow a little larger. Everything okay? I asked innocently. Just work stuff. You know how it is. I knew exactly how it was, and soon so would everyone else. The next phase of my plan required patience and precision. I spent the following week playing the role of the oblivious husband while quietly gathering more evidence and building my network of allies. Sarah Martinez agreed to meet me for coffee at a place downtown, far from Vanessa's firm. She was a small woman in her 30s with tired eyes and nervous hands that shook slightly when she talked about Greg Porter. He has a type, she told me over her latte. Married women who work in professional settings, lawyers, paralegals, executives, women who have something to lose if the affair comes out. Why married women specifically? Control. A single woman might expect a relationship, might make demands. But a married woman? She's already trapped. She can't make waves without destroying her own life. Sarah explained Greg's method in detail. He would identify potential targets, usually women who seemed unhappy or vulnerable. Then he'd begin a campaign of attention and flattery, making them feel special and desired. Once he had them hooked, he'd use the relationship for whatever he needed: information, influence, or just entertainment. What happened with you? I was going through a rough patch with my husband. Greg picked up on it and started offering a shoulder to cry on. Before I knew it, we were having lunch, then drinks, then... She shrugged. He made me feel like I was the most important person in the world until I wasn't. What changed? I started asking questions about our future, whether he'd ever leave his girlfriend, whether what we had meant anything to him. Sarah's laugh was bitter. That's when I found out I wasn't the only one. He was juggling 3 different affairs at the time, all with married women from the firm. Is that when you filed the complaint? That's when I tried to end it. The complaint came later after he started retaliating. Suddenly, my work wasn't good enough. My performance reviews were terrible. My assignments were being given to other people. When I confronted him, he made it clear that my career was in his hands. The pattern was exactly what I'd suspected. Greg Porter was a predator who used his position and charm to manipulate vulnerable women, then discarded them when they became inconvenient. Vanessa wasn't special. She was just the latest victim in a long line. Except that Vanessa wasn't really a victim, was she? She was a willing participant who was planning to betray me just as thoroughly as Greg was betraying her. There's something else you should know, Sarah said as we prepared to leave. Greg keeps trophies. What kind of trophies? Photos, videos, personal items. He has a safe in his apartment where he stores mementos from his conquests. He showed me once when he was drunk, said it was his insurance policy. That was interesting. If I could get access to Greg's apartment, I might find evidence of other affairs that could be used against him. But breaking and entering was a line I wasn't ready to cross. Yet, instead, I focused on building my case through legitimate means. I reached out to the other women who'd filed complaints against Greg, using the information Tommy had found in public records. Most wouldn't talk to me, but a few were willing to share their stories off the record. The picture that emerged was of a man who viewed women as objects to be collected and used. Greg Porter wasn't just unfaithful, he was systematically predatory, using his position at the firm to coerce and manipulate vulnerable employees. Armed with this information, I began phase 2 of my plan, turning Greg and Vanessa's relationship into a tool against them. I started small. Anonymous tips to the firm's human resources department about Greg's behavior. Casual mentions to mutual acquaintances about seeing Vanessa and Greg together at odd times. Nothing actionable, just enough to plant seeds of doubt and suspicion. Meanwhile, I played the part of the loving husband at home. I brought Vanessa flowers, complimented her new clothes, and listened with apparent interest as she talked about her cases. All the while, I was documenting everything: her schedule, her phone calls, her moods. The hardest part was the physical intimacy. Vanessa had been distant for months, claiming she was tired or stressed or had early meetings. But now, perhaps feeling guilty about her affair, she was making an effort to be affectionate. Every kiss felt like a betrayal, every touch like a lie. 2 weeks after the Christmas party, Vanessa announced that she'd be working late on a big case. "Don't wait up," she said, kissing my cheek as she left. "This could take all night." I waited exactly 30 minutes before following her. Not to the office, as I'd expected, but to Greg's apartment building downtown. It was a converted warehouse in the trendy part of the city, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows. The kind of place that screamed young professional with more money than sense. I parked across the street and called Tommy. "I need you to come downtown. Bring your camera with the long lens." "What are we doing?" "Surveillance. And maybe a little breaking and entering." "Nick, I really don't think..." "They're in his apartment right now, Tommy. My wife and her boyfriend are probably screwing on his Italian leather couch while I sit here like an idiot. I need evidence, and I need leverage." Tommy arrived 20 minutes later with a professional-grade camera and a resigned expression. "This is a bad idea," he said, but he started taking photos anyway. We documented Vanessa's car in the visitor parking, the lights in Greg's third-floor apartment, and eventually silhouettes in the windows that left no doubt about what was happening inside. "How long do we wait?" Tommy asked. "As long as it takes." It took 3 hours. When Vanessa finally emerged from the building, her hair was mussed and her clothes were wrinkled. She looked around nervously before getting in her car, clearly worried about being seen. I followed her home from a distance, arriving just minutes after she did. When I walked into the house, she was already in her pajamas, sitting on the couch with a glass of wine and her laptop. "How was work?" I asked. "Exhausting. The Henderson case is more complicated than we thought." She didn't even look up from her screen. "That's too bad. Maybe you should delegate more." "Maybe." She closed the laptop and stretched. "I'm going to bed. Are you coming up?" "In a few minutes." After she was gone, I sat in the dark living room and reviewed the photos Tommy had taken. They were damning, but not enough. I needed something bigger, something that would give me complete control over the situation. That's when I remembered what Sarah had told me about Greg's trophies. The next day, I drove past Greg's building during lunch, studying the layout and security measures. It was a modern complex with keycard access and security cameras. But it wasn't Fort Knox. The parking garage was accessible from the street, and the elevator required a keycard to reach the residential floors. I was still working out the logistics when opportunity presented itself. Vanessa announced that she'd be attending a legal conference in Chicago for 3 days, leaving Thursday morning and returning Saturday night. "It's the Peterson and Associates annual symposium," she explained. "All the top corporate defense attorneys will be there. Great networking opportunity." I nodded and made supportive noises, but I was already planning. A quick check of the conference website confirmed that Greg Porter was also listed as an attendee. They'd probably booked adjoining rooms and planned a romantic getaway on the firm's dime, which meant Greg's apartment would be empty for 3 days. I spent Wednesday evening at the shop with Tommy, going over the plan one more time. "This is insane," he said for the 100th time. "If we get caught, we're going to jail." "We're not going to get caught. And even if we do, what's the worst that happens? Breaking and entering? Compared to what they've done to me, it's nothing. What if there's nothing there? What if this Sarah woman was lying or mistaken? Then we leave and pretend it never happened. But if she's right, if Greg really does keep evidence of his affairs, then we'll have enough ammunition to destroy both of them." Tommy shook his head, but didn't argue further. He'd known me long enough to recognize when my mind was made up. Thursday morning, I kissed Vanessa goodbye and wished her luck at the conference. She was practically vibrating with excitement, and I could see her phone buzzing with what were probably messages from Greg about their travel plans. "I'll miss you," she said, and for a moment I almost believed her. "Miss you too. Have fun." As soon as her taxi disappeared around the corner, I called Tommy. "It's time." Getting into Greg's apartment was easier than I'd expected. Tommy and I waited until after midnight, when the building's lobby was empty and the security guard was making his rounds. The parking garage had a pedestrian entrance that was supposed to be locked, but the mechanism was broken. A fact I'd discovered during my earlier reconnaissance. We took the stairs to avoid the elevator cameras, climbing 3 flights in tense silence. The hallway was dimly lit and quiet, with thick carpeting that muffled our footsteps. Greg's apartment was at the end of the hall, and his door was secured with a standard deadbolt and chain lock. Tommy had brought a set of lockpicks he'd acquired during his brief, misspent youth, and it took him less than 5 minutes to get us inside. The apartment was exactly what I'd expected from someone like Greg Porter. Expensive furniture, abstract art on the walls, and a kitchen that looked like it had never been used for actual cooking. Everything was clean and modern and completely soulless. "Where do we start?" Tommy whispered. "Sarah said he had a safe, probably in the bedroom." We found it in the walk-in closet, hidden behind a row of designer suits. It was a small fireproof safe, the kind you could buy at any office supply store. The electronic lock beeped softly as I tried various combinations. "Try his birthday," Tommy suggested. I'd memorized Greg's personal information during my research. His birthday didn't work, nor did his social security number or any of the other obvious choices. "Wait," I said, remembering something from Vanessa's text messages. "Try 0322. The safe clicked open. Inside was exactly what Sarah had described. A collection of photographs, USB drives, and personal items that told the story of Greg's disturbing pursuits. There were dozens of photos of different women, some clearly taken without their knowledge. The USB drives were labeled with initials and dates, a filing system for his twisted trophies. I found the drive labeled VC Deck and felt my stomach clench. There were photos of Vanessa that I'd never seen before, some taken in our own house, in our bedroom, in our garage workshop. Jesus, Tommy muttered, looking over my shoulder. This guy is sick. But the photos weren't the worst part. The worst part was the document folder labeled Insurance, which contained detailed information about each of Greg's affairs. Names, addresses, employment information, family details. He'd been building dossiers on his victims, collecting information that could be used for blackmail or coercion. Vanessa's file was particularly thorough. Greg had documented her schedule, her habits, her financial information, even details about my business. He knew about our mortgage, our investments, our marriage problems. He'd been planning this seduction for months, maybe longer. We need to copy all of this, I said, pulling out my own USB drive. Nick, we should just take the whole safe and get out of here. No, if everything disappears, he'll know someone was here. But if we just copy the files, he might not notice for weeks. It took nearly an hour to transfer everything. Photos, videos, documents, financial records. Greg Porter's entire collection of evidence against his victims. By the time we were finished, I had enough ammunition to destroy not just Greg and Vanessa, but potentially dozens of other people. The question was, what was I going to do with it? We were preparing to leave when I heard the sound of a key card in the front door lock. Tommy and I froze, staring at each other in terror. Someone was coming into the apartment. I quickly closed the safe and shoved Tommy toward the bedroom window. It opened onto a fire escape that led down to the alley behind the building. We could hear voices in the living room now. Greg's voice and a woman's laugh that definitely wasn't Vanessa's. We climbed out onto the fire escape just as footsteps approached the bedroom. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure it could be heard 3 blocks away. I can't believe you came back early, the woman was saying. What happened to Chicago? Change of plans, Greg replied. Vanessa got food poisoning at dinner. Poor thing could barely stand up. Tommy and I exchanged glances. Either Vanessa was genuinely sick or something had gone wrong with their romantic getaway. So, she's in her hotel room alone? Completely out of commission, which means we have the whole night to ourselves. I recognized the woman's voice now. It was Jill Brennan, Vanessa's best friend and the firm's human resources director. The same Jill who'd been covering for Vanessa's affair, helping her with alibis and excuses. The irony was perfect. While Vanessa was sick in Chicago, Greg was back home screwing her best friend. We made it down the fire escape and back to my truck without being discovered. I drove home in silence, my mind racing with possibilities. The USB drive in my pocket contained enough evidence to destroy everyone involved, but I needed to be strategic about how I used it. The next morning, I called Vanessa's hotel in Chicago. I'm sorry to bother you, I told the desk clerk, but I'm trying to reach my wife, Vanessa Callahan. She was supposed to call last night, but I haven't heard from her. I'm worried she might be sick. Let me check on that for you, sir. There was a pause. Then, Mrs. Callahan checked out early yesterday evening. She said she had a family emergency. Interesting. So Vanessa had left Chicago, but she hadn't come home, which meant she was probably with Greg somewhere else, unaware that he'd returned early to sleep with her best friend. I spent the day at the shop, copying the stolen files and organizing them into a comprehensive dossier. Tommy helped, though he kept shaking his head and muttering about how crazy this all was. What's the end game here, Nick? What do you actually want to accomplish? I want them to pay. All of them. Greg, Vanessa, Jill, everyone who participated in this betrayal. And then what? You think you'll feel better after you've destroyed their lives? I looked up from the computer screen where I was cataloging Greg's victims. I don't know if I'll feel better, but I'll feel like justice was served. That's not justice, man. That's revenge. Sometimes they're the same thing. Vanessa returned home Saturday evening, looking tired and pale. She claimed she'd gotten food poisoning at the conference and had to come home early, spending the extra day recovering at her sister's house. I'm sorry I didn't call, she said, unpacking her suitcase. I was so sick I could barely think straight. That's terrible, honey. Are you feeling better now? Much better. Just tired. I watched her unpack, noting that her clothes were wrinkled and her toiletries were arranged differently than usual. She'd definitely been somewhere other than her sister's house. How was the conference before you got sick? Oh, boring legal stuff. Lots of networking and presentations. She was avoiding eye contact, focusing intently on folding her clothes. Did Greg Porter give his presentation? I remember you mentioning he was speaking. I think so. I didn't see much of it because I was feeling sick. Another lie. According to the conference website, Greg's presentation had been canceled due to unforeseen circumstances, which meant they'd both left Chicago early, probably to spend time together somewhere else. Well, I'm glad you're home safe. I missed you. I missed you too. But she didn't kiss me, and she didn't meet my eyes, and when she went to shower, I heard her talking quietly on her phone behind the closed bathroom door. That night, as Vanessa slept beside me, I lay awake planning my next move. I had the evidence I needed to destroy everyone involved in the conspiracy against me. The question was how to deploy it for maximum effect. I could go to the police, but adultery wasn't a crime, and the evidence I'd gathered through breaking and entering might not be admissible in court. I could go to the State Bar Association, but that would only affect Greg's professional license. No, what I needed was something more comprehensive, something that would destroy not just their careers, but their reputations, their relationships, their entire carefully constructed lives. I needed to turn them against each other. The plan that formed in my mind over the following days was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of attacking Greg and Vanessa directly, I would use their own secrets against them, letting their paranoia and guilt do most of the work. It started with anonymous messages. I created several fake email accounts and began sending carefully crafted messages to key players in the drama. To Jill Brennan, I sent photos of Greg with other women, along with a note suggesting that she wasn't as special as she thought. To Greg, I sent evidence of Vanessa's previous affairs, implying that she was using him just as she'd used others. To Vanessa, I sent the most devastating message of all, a photo of Greg and Jill together, along with a copy of Greg's insurance file about her. I watched the results unfold over the next week like a master chess player executing a complex strategy. Vanessa became increasingly paranoid, checking her phones constantly and jumping at every unexpected noise. Greg grew suspicious and defensive, clearly worried about who might have access to his secrets. The tension between them was palpable. Their text messages, which I continued to monitor through Vanessa's hidden phone, became increasingly strained and accusatory. "Someone knows about us," Vanessa texted. "That's impossible. You're being paranoid. Then explain the photos. Explain how someone got into your apartment." "I don't know, but panicking won't help. We need to stay calm and figure out who's behind this." But staying calm was exactly what they couldn't do. The anonymous messages had triggered their deepest fears and insecurities, turning them against each other just as I'd hoped. The final phase of my plan would require perfect timing and a bit of luck. But if everything went according to schedule, Greg Porter and Vanessa Callahan would destroy each other, leaving me free to pick up the pieces of my life and start over. All I had to do was wait for the right moment to spring the trap. The opportunity I'd been waiting for came sooner than expected. Vanessa announced that the firm was throwing a New Year's Eve party at the same downtown hotel where their Christmas party had been held. She seemed nervous about it, constantly checking her reflection and changing outfits multiple times. "Are you sure you want to go?" she asked as we got ready. "I know these firm events aren't really your thing." "I wouldn't miss it," I replied, adjusting my tie in the mirror. "After all, it's not every day we get to celebrate new beginnings." The ballroom was decorated in gold and silver, with champagne flowing freely and a live jazz band playing in the corner. The same crowd was there, partners and their spouses, associates trying to network their way up the ladder, support staff enjoying a rare night of luxury. But the atmosphere was different this time. There was an undercurrent of tension that I could feel as soon as we walked in. Conversations stopped when Greg entered the room, and I noticed several people whispering and pointing. The anonymous messages had done their work. Rumors were circulating about Greg's behavior, about his relationships with married colleagues, about his collection of compromising photos. Nothing concrete enough for official action, but plenty to damage his reputation and make people uncomfortable around him. Vanessa was on edge, drinking more than usual and constantly scanning the room. She kept checking her phone, and I could see her hands shaking slightly when she thought no one was looking. "Everything okay?" I asked innocently. "Fine, just tired. It's been a long year." Greg arrived fashionably late, but his usual confidence was missing. He looked haggard with dark circles under his eyes and a forced smile that didn't reach his face. Several people avoided making eye contact with him, and I saw him approach a group of junior associates only to have them find excuses to move away. The confrontation I'd been orchestrating finally came to a head around 10 o'clock. I was standing near the bar when I saw Jill Brennan corner Greg by the windows. Their conversation quickly became heated, with Jill gesticulating angrily and Greg trying to calm her down. I couldn't hear what they were saying over the music, but their body language told the story clearly enough. Vanessa noticed the argument too. I watched her face go pale as she realized what was happening. She started walking toward them, but I intercepted her. "Dance with me," I said, taking her hand. "Nick, I don't really feel like—" "I insist." I led her onto the dance floor, positioning us so she had a clear view of Greg and Jill's increasingly public argument. Other people were starting to notice now, conversations stopping as heads turned toward the drama unfolding by the windows. "What are they fighting about?" Vanessa asked, trying to sound casual. "I have no idea, but it looks serious." Jill's voice was rising now, loud enough to be heard over the music. "Lying to me for months! I know about the others, Greg. I know about all of them." Greg grabbed her arm, trying to pull her toward a more private area, but Jill shook him off. "Don't touch me! I'm done covering for you, done making excuses, done pretending you're anything other than a predator." The word predator cut through the ballroom like a knife. Conversation stopped entirely now, and all eyes were on the unfolding drama. Vanessa went rigid in my arms. "We should leave," she whispered. "Why? It's just getting interesting." That's when Jill played her trump card. She pulled out her phone and held it up for everyone to see. "You want to know what kind of man Greg Porter really is? Look at this." She started showing photos to anyone within reach, the same photos I'd sent her anonymously, showing Greg with various women in compromising positions. The crowd pressed closer, phones appearing as people started recording the spectacle. Greg lunged for Jill's phone, but she pulled it away. "Everyone should know what you are," she shouted. "Everyone should know about your sick collection, your blackmail files, your insurance policies." That's when Vanessa broke. She pushed away from me and rushed toward the confrontation, clearly intending to protect Greg or at least minimize the damage, but her intervention only made things worse. "Jill, stop!" Vanessa called out. "You don't understand!" "Oh, I understand perfectly!" Jill turned on her with fury in her eyes. "I understand that you've been covering for him, lying for him, helping him destroy other women's lives while he was screwing both of us." The revelation hit the crowd like a bomb. Vanessa Callahan, respected partner at one of the city's most prestigious law firms, was involved in a love triangle with a disgraced figure. Phones appeared everywhere, recording every moment of her humiliation. "That's not—" Vanessa started, but Greg cut her off. "Shut up," he hissed. "Both of you, just shut up." But it was too late. The damage was done. The crowd was buzzing with excitement, and I could see firm partners huddled together, clearly discussing the implications of what they'd just witnessed. That's when I made my move. I walked calmly to the center of the crowd and raised my voice. "Excuse me, everyone. I think there's something you should know." All eyes turned to me. Vanessa looked horrified, Greg looked furious, and Jill looked confused. Perfect. "My name is Nick Callahan, and Vanessa is my wife. What you've just witnessed is the culmination of a months-long affair that has destroyed my marriage, and apparently several other relationships as well." I pulled out my phone and connected it to the room's sound system, a trick Tommy had helped me set up earlier. "I have evidence of Greg Porter's systematic maltreatment and manipulation of female colleagues, including detailed files he kept for blackmail purposes." The audio began playing recordings of Greg and Vanessa planning my sedating, discussing their affair, talking about their plans to divorce me and take my assets. The crowd listened in stunned silence as my wife's voice filled the ballroom. "Sometimes I wonder why I married such a boring man." "At least he's useful. That shop of his must be worth something." "Not as much as you'd think, but the house is in both our names." Vanessa was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks as she realized the extent of her exposure. Greg was backing toward the exit, but Tommy appeared to block his path, another part of our plan. "There's more," I continued. "Photos, videos, financial records. Greg Porter has been running a systematic campaign of manipulative maltreatment and blackmail, using his position at this firm to coerce vulnerable women into relationships." I gestured to Sarah Martinez, who had been waiting in the crowd. She stepped forward with several other women, Greg's former victims, who had agreed to come forward once they knew they weren't alone. "We filed complaints," Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom. "But they were buried, settled quietly, covered up to protect the firm's reputation. Well, we're not staying quiet anymore." The crowd erupted in chaos. Firm partners were shouting at each other, trying to figure out how to contain the damage. Greg was attempting to push past Tommy, who was enjoying his role as an immovable obstacle. Vanessa was sobbing openly, her carefully constructed facade completely shattered, and I stood in the center of it all, finally feeling the satisfaction I'd been craving for weeks. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said as the chaos reached its peak, "I give you the true face of Morrison, Klein, and Associates, a firm that protects predators and punishes victims, a firm that values profit over people, reputation over justice." The jazz band had stopped playing, the champagne had stopped flowing, the New Year's Eve celebration had become a public execution, and I was the executioner. Security guards were moving through the crowd now, trying to restore order, but it was too late. The damage was done, the truth was out, and there was no putting the genie back in the bottle. Greg finally broke free from Tommy and rushed toward me, his face twisted with rage. "You bastard! You destroyed everything!" "No," I replied calmly, as security guards moved to intercept him. "You destroyed everything. I just made sure everyone could see it." He swung at me, but I'd been expecting it. I stepped aside and let him stumble past, his wild punch connecting with nothing but air. The security guards tackled him immediately, dragging him toward the exit as he screamed threats and accusations. Vanessa approached me through the chaos, her face streaked with tears and makeup. "Nick, please, we need to talk. I can explain." "There's nothing to explain," I said. "I heard everything I needed to hear. I saw everything I needed to see. We're done, Vanessa, completely done. But the house, our life together, will be settled by lawyers, good ones, not the corrupt predator enablers you work with." She stared at me for a long moment, perhaps finally understanding that the meek, boring husband she'd taken for granted was capable of complete and total revenge. "I never meant for it to happen this way," she whispered. "Yes, you did. You planned every bit of it, right down to sedating me so you could sneak off with your boyfriend. The only thing you didn't plan for was getting caught." The crowd was dispersing now, people streaming toward the exits with their phones still recording. The story would be all over social media within hours, and by morning it would be front-page news in the legal community. Morrison, Klein, and Associates would survive the scandal, but not unchanged. Greg Porter's career was over, and Vanessa's reputation was destroyed. The other women who had been victimized would finally get their justice, and the firm would be forced to implement real reforms to prevent future misuse. As for me, I walked out of that ballroom with my head held high, knowing that I'd fought back against people who thought they were untouchable. I'd used their own tools against them: manipulation, betrayal, public humiliation, and I'd won. Tommy was waiting for me in the lobby, grinning broadly. "How do you feel? Like I can finally breathe again?" We walked out into the cold December night, leaving the chaos and destruction behind us. Somewhere in the distance, church bells were ringing, welcoming the new year. It was going to be a very good year indeed. 6 months later, the divorce was final. Vanessa had tried to fight for half of everything, but the evidence of her affair and her plans to defraud me made that impossible. She settled for much less than she'd hoped for, and I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd left town to start over somewhere else. Greg Porter was disbarred and faced multiple civil lawsuits from his victims. Last I heard, he was working at his father's insurance company in Ohio, a spectacular fall from grace that satisfied me more than I'd expected. Jill Brennan kept her job, but was demoted and transferred to a different department. She sent me a letter apologizing for her role in the deception, but I never responded. Some betrayals are too deep for forgiveness. As for me, I kept the shop, kept the house, and started dating again. Nothing serious yet, but I was in no hurry. I'd learned the hard way that trust was precious and fragile, and I wouldn't make the mistake of giving it too freely again. The best part was the reputation I'd gained in our small legal community. Word had spread about how I'd taken down Greg Porter and exposed the corruption at Morrison, Klein, and Associates. Other betrayed spouses started coming to me for advice, and I found myself becoming an unofficial consultant for people seeking justice against unfaithful partners. I never charged for the advice. After all, revenge was its own reward.